Hello everybody and welcome to Parks Bros. It's Drew here, and today we've got some shocking news coming out of at least Disneyland and Walt Disney World, and that's the fact that Splash Mountain will soon be rethemed to the Princess and the Frog. Now, I actually already had a video for today lined up involving the fact that Disneyland's reopening date, or at least their proposed reopening date, has been pushed back and postponed for the time being, and we will not be able to hear about any potential reopening date until after the 4th of July. And that makes complete sense because the state of California has said that they will not be giving out that information until after the 4th of July, whether major theme and amusement parks can reopen. And of course, it's going to take longer than 2 weeks to rehire and retrain all the employees. But this morning, I was awoken with the news that Splash Mountain will be officially rethemed in the near future, at least in the US parks, to the 2009 film adaptation of Princess and the Frog. And it has been said that Walt Disney Imagineering has been apparently working on this for over a year. But if you did not know, many of the main characters and the main storyline of Splash Mountain were taken from a 1946 film called Song of the South. Now, if you haven't heard of this film, it is probably one of the most infamous and controversial films in history due to its portrayal of African Americans in the Reconstruction South. Now, throughout the film, one of the main characters does mention these stories of the Brer Bear, the Brer Fox, and of course, Brer Rabbit, which is what these characters originally came from. Now, whether you like it or not, Splash Mountain has been kind of controversial ever since it opened for the inclusion of these characters. But of course, when this ride was designed and built for Disneyland and eventually multiple different Disney parks around the world, they tried their best to split all of those Brer characters from the film. But after officially opening on July 17th of 1989, being nearly 21 years ago, it seems like history is caught up with the ride. And it will be going under major change to be rethemed to The Princess and the Frog, which takes a spin on that original classic story and features Princess Tiana, who dreams of one day opening an amazing restaurant in New Orleans. Now, of course, she meets up with Prince Naveen, who at the time is a frog, and eventually run into trouble with Dr. Facilier. Now, this film features many wonderful characters that all reside in the bayou. But I do think it's going to be interesting seeing what happens with both of the Splash Mountains at Disneyland and Walt Disney World, just because of their different placements in the lands that they are in. With Disneyland, of course, it's in Critter Country, which is its own land that originally used to have just the Country Bear Jamboree and Splash Mountain. Now, of course, Country Bear Jamboree has been replaced with the Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, and now with Splash Mountain being removed, they are definitely tying in that ride towards New Orleans a little more, with New Orleans Square being the land right next door. Now, I do think this will be a better transition from New Orleans Square to Critter Country, but at the same time, Critter Country really kind of only exists with Winnie the Pooh now. But then again, you could argue ever since that ride opened, a majority of the land has been based and focused on Winnie the Pooh, with many character meet and greets in the area just for that IP, and of course the main shopping center of the area based on it as well. But I do think Princess and the Frog will be a nice tweener ride between lands, with of course being based in New Orleans, but also having that same focus on, of course, critters, with many of the characters of the bayou. But heading over to Walt Disney World, their Splash Mountain is in Frontierland. So I do think it'll be a little tougher to try and tie in that theme to that area, especially timing wise, because I can sure as heck tell you that The Princess and the Frog does not take place in the Old West, but we'll just have to see the magic these Imagineers can pull off with the ride itself to try and tie it into the land a little bit. Whereas at Disneyland, I think they're not going to struggle with that at all, except for the fact that Winnie the Pooh is going to be the only critter-centric ride in Critter Country. Now, believe it or not, only the United States parks have been announced to have this change done to their Splash Mountain. So that means over in Tokyo Disneyland, their Splash Mountain, at least for the time being, is going to remain Splash Mountain, which is honestly the weirdest part of all of this to me. Because if you were testing out this new idea for the ride, it would make sense to only do it on one attraction. But they're obviously doing it on both US parks, which makes me wonder why they're leaving out Tokyo at this point. And honestly, if they're trying to change the ride for the times, which Disney has done frequently in the past, and it's almost as Disney as you can get, with this new innovation always coming around to every single ride out there. But I'm really still kind of perplexed why Tokyo Disneyland, at least as of now, has not been announced to have this change done as well. But I do want to tell you guys why you should not be surprised that this is happening. And it's not just what's going on in the US at this time. If you've been to Disneyland over the past decade, you definitely should have noticed the inclusion of especially Dr. Facilier as well as Princess Tiana in everything revolving around New Orleans Square and even towards Frontierland. Now these characters have been popping up almost daily, it seems like, to take a ride on, of course, the Mark Twain riverboat or just stroll around New Orleans Square. Now, it seems like ever since the movie was released in 2009, they have amped that appearance up farther and farther to becoming part of that New Orleans Square experience. Now, of course, I can't speak towards Walt Disney World since I've never been able to go, but at least in Disneyland, with the added inclusions of meet and greets in New Orleans Square, as well as many different types of parade floats and show additions throughout the past couple years at the park, I think having a ride themed to the film is just the logical next step. Now, how do I feel about this? I don't know. When I first heard it, I was kind of in shock, but at the same time, almost not surprised. And I did figure the retheming of Splash Mountain would happen sooner rather than later, but it is still something that can be a shock, especially to someone like me who has grown up with this ride. Now, I must admit, Splash Mountain is one of my favorite rides in the entirety of the park, and I am pretty sad about seeing it change. And heck, even the first 5 minutes I heard about this news, I was almost opposed to it. But after really thinking about it, and taking the time to really collect my thoughts, I can definitely say that I think this fit will work out in the end. Overall, I do think this is going to be another case with especially like the Tower of Terror at California Adventure, where there are going to be so many fans that are so upset that they'll still always say that Tower of Terror is better. But with Disney, you always got to keep moving forward. You got to always expect this change. And whether you like it or not, even if it's your favorite ride in the world, Disney may think it's time for the ride to change eventually. So while Splash Mountain is definitely one of my favorite rides of all time, I do think at this point it is a good decision. And for as much as I love this ride and will be sad about it going, I must say I'm pretty excited for the future to see what they do with this entire ride concept. Because if Disney has shown us anything over the past decade or so, when they want to retheme a ride, they usually seem to do incredibly well with it. I will truthfully cherish my memories listening to Zippity Doo-Dah on Splash Mountain for as long as I'll be able to remember it. But as of right now, I think it's best that we keep moving forward into the future of what Disney Imagineering brings to us. But I do want to say thank you so much for watching. But until next time, we'll see you on the next ride.